It's been over 50 years, but we are finally going back to the moon. The Artemis 2 mission, it's so much more than just another flight. It's a really critical test, it's a bold statement, and honestly, it's the start of a whole new chapter for us in deep space exploration. Okay, let's get into this historic journey.
And at the very heart of it all are the 4 astronauts, carrying the hopes of pretty much the entire world on their shoulders. These words from them before launch, they just perfectly capture the huge weight and purpose of this mission. It's not just about the hardware. It's about pushing that frontier for every single one of us back on Earth. But before they could actually soar into space, the crew and that entire launch team had to get through one of the most stressful moments you can imagine in any spaceflight, the final countdown.
Just look at this thing. What we're seeing here is the incredible scale of the Space Launch System, or SLS rocket. Standing 322 feet tall, it is the most powerful rocket in operation today, and it was designed for one single purpose: to send human beings back into deep space.
But even with this beast of a machine, the launch was anything but a sure thing. Just hours before liftoff, a major problem popped up. At 4:48 p.m., there's an issue with the flight termination system. That's the safety device that would destroy the rocket if it goes off course, and it triggers a no-go. For a nail-biting 28 minutes, the entire mission was just hanging in the balance until engineers figured it out. And then finally, with just 4 minutes to spare, the final pull was a unanimous go. Talk about a cliffhanger.
And that whole near-miss situation really drives home a crucial point. Artemis 2 is a test flight. Mission specialist Jeremy Hansen said it so bluntly before the mission. They knew the dangers, and this quote just perfectly underscores the incredible bravery of this crew and the massive stakes involved when you're pioneering a whole new generation of space travel.
All right, so with the countdown cleared, it was time for the main event. A moment that was more than a decade in the making, and it was all powered by an absolutely unprecedented amount of force.
So, how in the world do you get a 5.7 million pound rocket off the ground and pointed towards the moon? Well, you use the SLS, which generates a staggering 8.8 million pounds of thrust. To put that in perspective for you, that's more raw power than even the mighty Saturn V rockets that took the Apollo astronauts to the moon. Just incredible.
The ride up is, well, it's a series of perfectly timed, violent events. Just 2 minutes after liftoff, the 2 huge solid rocket boosters, having done their job, separate from the core stage. They've burned all their fuel, and they just fall away.
Then, bam! At the 8-minute mark, the giant orange core stage, after burning through more than 730,000 gallons of propellant, shuts down its engines and detaches. That leaves the Orion spacecraft to finally continue its journey up to orbit.
And this is the moment the absolute chaos of the launch just gives way to the quiet of space. What we're seeing is the final piece of the rocket, the Orion stage adapter, just drifting away. For the very first time, the Orion capsule and its crew are flying free, completely safe in orbit around the Earth.
So they're in orbit. Mission accomplished, right? Nope, not even close. Reaching Earth orbit was just the beginning. The crew was now setting off on this carefully choreographed 10-day journey that would take them farther from Earth than any human has ever been before.
Now, the key to this whole journey is this really clever idea called the free return trajectory. It's an incredible piece of orbital mechanics. Basically, you aim the spacecraft just right so that if the main engine were to fail, the moon's gravity would naturally grab the capsule, swing it around the far side, and sling it right back towards Earth. It's like a built-in cosmic safety net.
So here's the play-by-play for their 250,000-mile round trip. First, they spend a full day just hanging out in a high Earth orbit, kind of like a shakedown cruise to test all of Orion's systems. Then they hit the gas, firing the engine for the trans-lunar injection. That's the big burn that kicks them out of Earth's gravity and sends them on a 4-day coast to the moon. After looping around the far side, they begin the 4-day trip home, ending with a splashdown in the Pacific.
But this was way more than just a test flight. Artemis 2 was also a major science mission, and really, the astronauts themselves were the main research subjects.
It's a fair question, right? Besides kicking the tires on the spacecraft, a huge part of the mission is figuring out how the human body reacts to the really harsh environment of deep space.
So check this out. One of the most fascinating experiments is called Avatar. Before the flight, the astronauts donated blood. Then, scientists used those cells to grow bone marrow tissue on this tiny device called an organ chip. This little chip flew right alongside the crew, and by analyzing it after the flight, scientists can study the effects of deep space radiation on human cells without any risk to the astronauts themselves. It's brilliant.
And here's why that kind of research is so important. See, astronauts on the International Space Station are still kind of tucked inside Earth's protective magnetic field, but the Artemis II crew, they flew way beyond it. That exposed them to much higher levels of galactic cosmic rays. Figuring out what that does to us is absolutely critical before we can even think about sending people on long trips to the Moon or Mars.
And you know, while NASA's name is on the rocket, Artemis is fundamentally a global effort. This mission was a perfect example of that teamwork in action.
It's almost like they were carpooling to deep space. Tucked away in the rocket's upper stage were 4 small satellites, called CubeSats, and they weren't from NASA. They were provided by Argentina, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, and Germany. Each one is designed to do its own scientific research, essentially catching a ride to space on this historic flight.
And here's a look at one of them, the K-RAD Cube from South Korea. It's designed to measure space radiation using material that actually mimics human tissue, contributing vital data to the very same health questions the main mission is trying to answer.
Of course, the most visible international partner here is Canada, with Jeremy Hansen on the crew. And his seat wasn't just given to him, it was earned. Decades of Canadian contributions, especially in robotics, like the famous Canadarm, paid for that ticket. By providing the next-gen Canadarm3 for the future Lunar Gateway space station, Canada secured its place on this flight. It's this brilliant model. You exchange critical tech for a seat at the table.
So, with a successful test flight in the books, a ton of new scientific data, and stronger international partnerships, the big question becomes, what's next?
Well, Artemis II is just one step in a much bigger plan. The roadmap is pretty clear. The next mission, Artemis III, is scheduled for 2027, and that one will test rendezvous and docking. All crucial stuff. And then in 2028, Artemis IV aims to be the big one, the first crewed landing on the Moon's south pole in over half a century. This stunning view of our closest neighbor, captured during the first Artemis mission, it's just a powerful reminder of what this is all about. Artemis II proved we can get there again and get there safely. It unlocked this next stage of exploration. The Moon is the first step. The real question is, where do we go next?